A faint vibration spread across the galaxy like a ripple on an endless ocean, carrying with it a strange energy that no one could explain at first, and it was not just the humans on Earth who felt it, but countless civilizations across the stars, who stopped in silence when their sensors lit up with the same pattern, and it was not words, not music, not a signal anyone could decode, but a single unbroken rhythm like a heart beating from the depths of the void and in laboratories and control rooms. Scientists leaned forward, breath held, trying to capture every trace of it while generals demanded to know if it was a threat or a promise. And across alien empires, some panicked, while others whispered that the ancients had returned, and in the United States Space Command. A young scientist named Dr. Leah Carter stared at the waveform, repeating again and again, as if something alive was trying to be heard. And she whispered to herself that it was not coming from a planet or a star, but from empty space, where nothing should exist, and the realization spread like fire through every council, every war room, every senate of every world that something impossible was calling, and no one dared to ignore it. So fleets launched at once, each ship racing to the coordinates of the pulse, and for the first time in history, enemies turned toward the same destination because fear and wonder pulled them like gravity. And as human ships crossed the dark sea of stars, they saw other vessels, alien shapes gleaming their weapons quiet. For now, their eyes fixed forward, and the silence grew heavier with every light year. And then the moment came when the first human ship, the Horizon, reached the source. And what they saw defied reason, because out of the black nothingness, something colossal unfolded before their eyes like a city of light rising from the dark. Yet before they could blink, before their minds could register the impossible structure, it vanished without leaving a trace, and the crew gasped, thinking their eyes had betrayed them, but the sensors screamed with data saying the object had mass, had shape, had been real, and yet now it was gone, as if it had slipped out of reality itself. And Leah Carter felt her chest tighten, because deep inside she knew this was not the end, but the beginning. And she whispered to the captain that whatever had appeared was watching them even now, and the captain could not reply, for a sudden tremor passed through the ship, and the strange heartbeat rhythm returned louder, stronger, echoing not through speakers, but through their very bones and across the galaxy. Every species heard it again, the sound of something vast, something waiting, and no one could turn away because the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The galaxy was restless after the first sighting rumors, spreading faster than light itself, because every ship that had rushed to the coordinates reported the same impossible truth. They had seen something, enormous something that stretched across their view like a living fortress, and then it had vanished, as if mocking their eyes. And still the heartbeat pulse returned, steady and unbroken, and now no one could deny that something was there, waiting, just beyond their reach. And on Earth, Leah Carter stared at streams of data pouring from the horizon, her hands shaking as she saw readings that defied every known law of physics. Structures had been present, had absorbed light, had displaced matter, and yet left no trace of decay or energy bleed. It was as if the thing had folded out of space and then folded back in like a shadow, hiding in daylight, and across alien councils. Scientists and rulers argued if this was a weapon or a sign of gods, while soldiers sharpened their fleets, preparing for either miracle or war, and in orbit around the gas giant Vera, a species called the Drax, captured a fleeting recording the outline of one of the vanished structures, and when magnified, the image revealed something no one wanted to believe. The shape was not mechanical but organic. Its surface rippled like skin, its movements too precise to be random, and Leah Carter froze when the image reached her screen, because what they were chasing might not be ships, but living beings so vast they could build empires on their bodies, and if they were alive, then what did their heartbeat mean? Was it a message? Was it a warning? Or was it the slow breath of something waking up after 1,000,000 years of silence? And the galaxy did what it had never done before. It united for survival leaders who once hated each other. formed the Observation Alliance, a fragile network of ships and mines, agreeing to share their findings, because whatever this was. No one wanted to face it alone, and so fleets of different shapes and colors moved together toward the unknown, their captains silent, their weapons charged but hidden. And as they traveled deeper, the strange appearances grew more frequent. One moment, the void was empty. The next moment, a vast glowing spine curved across the stars, then vanished again. A colossal wing-like shadow brushed past a nebula and dissolved, and each time the same pulse followed, steady and endless, like the tolling of a universal bell, and more recordings were captured, though most were blurred or broken. But one from a Cathari scout ship froze every council in terror, because it showed not just a shape, but a movement. The colossal form turned its head as if noticing the tiny vessel, and then its eyes opened, glowing like dying suns before the vision dissolved into emptiness again. And the scout crew never spoke after that moment. Silent as statues, unable to describe what they had felt, only muttering one word. Again and again they see us, and Leah Carter felt the weight of those words deep in her bones, because if these things could see, them could choose when to appear and when to hide, then perhaps the galaxy was not chasing them at all. Perhaps the galaxy was being led somewhere. And as that thought spread, fleets hesitated, but the pulse kept calling, pulling them forward like a tide that could not be resisted. And Leah whispered in the horizon's dark observation deck that they were not explorers. Anymore, they were prey walking into the hunting ground of giants, and the silence that followed was colder than space itself. It began quietly, like a whisper traveling through the void unheard by machines, but echoing inside the minds of the young across countless worlds. And it was not only human children who stirred in the night speaking in strange voices, but alien. Children, too, from species that had never seen each other, never shared a word, and yet every child's story was the same. They spoke of beings made of light, towering shapes that bent around them like guardians or shadows, and the message was simple: prepare for what is coming. And on Earth, Leah Carter sat in disbelief as reports poured in from colonies and outposts across the stars, her screen filled with recordings of frightened parents describing their children's sudden visions, and though governments first dismissed it as fear-spreading like disease, the evidence grew too clear to ignore because the words were the same even across different languages, across throats that had never spoken the same sound. Prepare, 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 and soon it was not only words, but drawings. A 7-year-old girl in New York sketched a glowing map of stars she should never have known, while on a distant world orbiting Tau Ceti, an alien child with translucent skin traced the same shapes on a wall of sand, their hands trembling as if guided by something else. And when the maps were compared, they matched perfectly, pointing to a region feared by all spacefarers, the Dead Nebula, a place of silence where ships had entered but never returned. And Leah stared at the map, her breath shallow, because the pulse they had been chasing now had a destination, and the whispers of children across the galaxy were the compass leading toward it. And though leaders argued, calling it madness, hysteria, manipulation, the pull of the unknown was stronger than fear. And so the Alliance sent ships toward the Dead Nebula, fleets of human, alien, and hybrid craft, moving in cautious silence, their captains wary, their scientists eager, but none prepared for what they would face. And as the horizon drifted closer, Leah could feel the whispers herself, faint, not words, but a pressure behind her eyes, like a thought that was not her own, urging her to keep watching, to not look away. And she realized with horror that she had begun to hear what the children heard, and that meant the reach of these vanished beings was spreading far wider than anyone imagined. And as the fleet neared the edge of the nebula, the stars themselves seemed to dim the great. Clouds of dust, twisting like smoke around a fire, and the sensors failed, one by one, signals cut off as if the nebula swallowed technology whole, leaving only silence and heartbeat. And the further they went, the darker it grew until even the viewports showed nothing but a heavy, endless black that pressed against the mind more than the eyes, and captains sent frantic messages back to their councils. But one by one the signals died no trace, no echo, and in the command deck of the Horizon, Leah felt the last of their communication blink away, her chest tightening as the realization struck. They were alone, cut off from the galaxy with only the whispers to guide them, and in that silence the children's voices grew louder across every ship, words overlapping from 1,000 mouths speaking one sentence together. The door is waiting. The door is waiting. And the words repeated in rhythms matching the ancient pulse, the very heartbeat of the vanished ones. And as the nebula swallowed the fleet, deeper and deeper, Leah could no longer tell if the whispers were inside her mind or outside in the void itself. And just as she feared the pressure would shatter her thoughts, the darkness shifted and something vast began to glow ahead. Not a star, not a planet, but colossal ruins stretching wider than sight, and they pulsed with the same rhythm as the heartbeat, alive with impossible energy. And in that moment, Leah knew the galaxy had only stepped into the first chamber of a much greater design, and there was no turning back. The ruins floated in silence like broken bones of a forgotten god scattered across the black sea of the dead nebula. And as the fleet drifted closer, every sensor trembled, every screen flickered with unreadable symbols that shifted before the eyes could hold them, and Leah Carter pressed her hands against the glass of the Horizon's observation deck, her breath fogging the viewport as she tried to understand the impossible geometry before her. It was not built of stone nor metal nor any substance she knew, but of something that seemed to shift between matter and light, as if the structures refused to choose between existing and not existing, and around her the crew whispered in awe because the ruins looked ancient, worn by millions of years. Yet they pulsed with fresh energy like a newborn heartbeat rising from old bones, and ships from across the Alliance circled the fragments, cautiously, beams of scanners darting over jagged walls and shattered towers that stretched across the void, and though the ruins appeared broken, the pieces began to tremble as if the presence of the fleet had awoken them, dust and fragments rising in slow motion against the pull of gravity until the entire structure began to shift like a puzzle, rearranging itself into something whole, and Leah gripped her chair as the walls slid into alignment. Towers rotated, rings locked together, and the ruins transformed before their eyes into a vast circular gate big enough to swallow fleet's whole, its surface etched with glowing veins of blue light that pulsed to the same rhythm the galaxy had been hearing for weeks, and fear rippled through the fleet because every captain knew they were no longer observers. They were participants standing at the threshold of a power beyond imagination, and the gate began to hum a low vibration that shook hulls, rattled bones, and pulled the fleet closer. No matter how hard they tried to hold their position, their ship slid toward it as if space itself had tilted, and the nebula around them writhed clouds, twisting into spirals, pulled into the gravity of the awakening door, and inside Leah's mind, the whisper returned sharper, clearer than ever. Not words, but intent. Not a command, but an invitation. Step inside, and she looked at her captain, whose face had gone pale yet defiant as he ordered thrusters to maximum reverse. But it was useless. The pull was stronger than any engine, stronger than will itself. And across the Alliance, ships screamed as pilots fought controls that no longer answered. And still the pull tightened, dragging them closer inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat, until the horizon of the gate filled their entire view, the light blinding. White and blue shadows stretching across their decks, and in that final moment before the horizon was consumed, Leah felt her thoughts unravel as if something enormous had reached into her mind, peeling away fear, peeling away resistance, until only a strange calm remained, and then the gate opened with a roar of silence, like the universe itself taking a breath, and the entire fleet was pulled through, torn from the nebula, into a realm no one could have prepared for, a place where stars twisted, Like rivers where time bent like glass, where colors had no name and distances had no meaning, and the ships floated together inside a dimension that should not exist, and Leah's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from the overwhelming certainty that they were not trespassing. They were expected. They had crossed into the heart of the vanished ones, and the true trial was only beginning. The fleet drifted in silence through the strange dimension, as if caught inside the dream of something older than stars, and nothing behaved as it should. Space bent and twisted like liquid light ships appeared close, then far away without moving, their hulls stretching like reflections on rippling water, and clocks no longer ticked in unison, seconds turning to minutes, then back to seconds again, and crews struggled to stay sane. But the pull of the place was stronger than fear keeping them. Suspended in its endless glow, and Leah Carter clung to her console, her mind torn between terror and wonder, because she could feel it now, the presence of something vast pressing against her thoughts, not attacking, but watching, measuring. And then the trial began. At first it was subtle shadows forming on the decks of the ships, whispers echoing in the corners of minds. But soon the illusions sharpened, becoming visions so real they bled into the senses, each crew confronted by something unique, something born of their deepest flaws on the horizon. Soldiers found themselves surrounded by phantom enemies, their weapons useless, their courage fading, while on an alien vessel, the Drax warriors were shown mountains of treasure and power, if they would only abandon the fleet and bow to the light of the vanished ones. Another ship filled with scientists was presented with the perfect equation, the solution to immortality, but only if they betrayed their allies and returned home and through. It all, the steady pulse of the heartbeat rang like a drum. Each beat a question, each beat a judgment, and Leah realized the vanished ones were testing not their strength but their choices, stripping away pride, greed, and fear to see what remained. And on the horizon, she herself was not spared, her vision filled with Earth, her family, her childhood street glowing warm and safe, the whisper telling her she could go back, that none of this was real, that she was too small to matter. But Leah clenched, her fists, tears burning her eyes, because deep down she knew the truth. If she gave in, if any of them gave in, the trial would be lost, and the galaxy would be judged unworthy. And across the fleets many failed, some ships dissolving into light as their crews embraced illusions and were erased as if they had never existed, but others endured, choosing trust over fear, unity over greed, until the survivors found themselves drawn together, pulled toward the heart of the strange dimension, and there at last the entities revealed themselves. They did not step from ships nor towers, but unfolded from the light itself, giants of radiant form stretching across horizons, their shapes shifting between wings and spines, and rivers of flame too, vast to hold in a single thought. And when they spoke, it was not sound but truth, pressing into every mind at once. We are the vanished ones, guardians of balance, watchers of the young and trembling galaxy. And your trial has begun for too long. You have consumed without care, fought without purpose, destroyed without thought. And now we must decide if you are worthy to remain. And the survivors shivered at the weight of those words, because this was no myth, no legend, but judgment from beings who had shaped the galaxy long before their species were born. And as the silence deepened, the entities delivered their verdict. One must fall. One species must be erased so that balance may return. Choose or all will perish. And the words echoed across every ship like thunderless lightning. And Leah felt her blood run cold, because the galaxy had survived the trial of illusions, only to face an even darker truth. The future of every world now hung on a single impossible choice. The silence, after the verdict, was heavier than gravity itself, pressing against every ship, every mind, until it felt as though the dimension would crush them from within, and the fleets that had survived the trial turned on one another at once, suspicion blooming. into rage voices rising across comms as alien commanders shouted threats and human officers argued in panic, and the Drax warriors, already reaching for their weapons, swore they would not be the ones to vanish, while other species cried out that they were too valuable, too strong, too important to be erased. And in the heart of the horizon, Leah Carter watched the chaos unfold, her stomach twisting with dread, because she knew the trial had not ended. This was part of it, the final test. And, as the arguments spiraled into desperation, the entities stood silent, watching with eyes like burning stars, their radiant forms unmoving as if waiting for the galaxy to reveal its true self, and then their voices struck like lightning again. One will choose the weakest among you must decide, and at that moment, every voice fell silent. Every ship stilled, as if the void itself had frozen, because the words carried a strange power, a command. No one could resist, and slowly, every gaze turned toward one vessel. The horizon toward Earth, toward Leah Carter, for she was not a leader, not a warrior, not even a commander. She was a scientist, a single human from a small and fragile world, and yet the vanished ones had chosen her, and the weight of entire civilizations crashed upon her shoulders, and she felt her chest seize as the whispers grew louder, urging her to speak, to judge, to destroy. But Leah closed her eyes, trembling, and forced herself to breathe, because deep in her heart, she understood what the vanished ones were doing. They were not asking for destruction. They were asking if destruction was the only path the young galaxy could imagine, and so she raised her head, her voice steady, though her soul shook, and she spoke. Into the silence, not one, not a single species must fall. If we are to survive, we must stand together, because if we erase one, we erase ourselves. And the words rang across the dimension, defying the fear, defying the power of the entities, and for a long, endless moment, nothing happened. No reply, no judgment. Only the heavy silence of a galaxy waiting for its fate. And then the entities shifted their forms, trembling as though a storm had passed through them, and their light dimmed before blazing. Brighter than ever, and the voices returned softer, colder, yet touched with something like approval. You choose unity when war was easier. You choose balance when destruction was near. You have learned. But remember, lessons fade, and the vanished ones began to dissolve their vast shapes, unraveling into rivers of light that scattered across the strange sky like seeds cast into wind, and with them the dimension itself began to collapse, stars melting into shadows, horizons folding into themselves, ships tumbling as gravity returned, and in a blinding flash the surviving fleets were thrown back into the dead nebula engines, failing alarms, shrieking, but alive and together. And as the horizon steadied, Leah stared into the fading clouds, her heart pounding with awe and terror, for the last whisper of the vanished ones still echoed in her mind. "We will return when you forget this lesson." And as those words lingered, the galaxy held its breath, knowing it had survived not by strength, not by fear, but by the fragile courage of one voice. And though the vanished ones were gone, their shadow remained stretching across every star, a warning and a promise that the true trial of the galaxy had only just begun.